Hey, what's up? Welcome to Business Coder. Today we're going to make our dev environment setup and get started with the Electron application. It is more of a like introduction how to build an Electron desktop application using React TypeScript, and we are going to demonstrate that on a Mac. But the process will be almost the same for all platforms. Especially if you are on Linux kind of platform, it will be totally same. On a Windows, you have to consider making sure that your Node.js version is correct. I will say because there is like a lot of complicated stuff related to environment variables on Windows compared to Linux or Nix type of systems that I am right now. So without more discussions, let's just jump in and see what we actually going to make a setup for our building our desktop environment. So I'm using NVM, which is probably the most easiest way to get started with the different Node.js versions, especially compared if sometimes you need some modern Node.js version, and but you don't want to upgrade to anything else for your entire system. You can basically alias that. So NVM, it makes very easy to install Node.js, especially if you need different versions. But I'm primarily using this installation process because it's just so way uh, gets rid of any kind of complicated environment setup. It's just pretty straightforward. Uh, these installation scripts are working on almost all kind of platforms. Uh, on a Windows, you have to have a Bash environment setup in order to get this working. But I'm sure there is some alternative to this. Haven't really worked around that, but if you have any issues with setting up NVM on a Windows, just write a comment below. I'll try to jump on that and help you to get rid of that issues. So I already have this environment installed and the latest LTS for the Node.js on my environment. I'm usually sticking with LTS versions because they're pretty much stable and almost all cloud providers are moving pretty fast to support these LTS versions. But it is also like convenient to use the current version, which is not a long time support version, but you can get the latest features, or you probably need some testing around what is coming up for the next LTS versions. But let's just stick on one version. It's not important right now for us to get some of the latest features for Node.js. Anyway, we are going to use a TypeScript, which is a modern, I'll say, JavaScript code style. We don't need anything else right now. And the next step, we are going to actually get started with Electron. It will be a Hello World application, I will say, but with the integration of React. Almost all get started tutorials that you will find by browsing the uh, documentation of Electron. You will get this kind of basic setup where there is no UI JavaScript functionality that's going on. And I decided just to make a video related to how we actually going to connect React and Electron. because there is a little bit of a gap there. Electron is actually designed to serve local static JavaScript files, and in terms of React, you have to have kind of Webpack builder, or we are going to use a create React app, but the process is the same. So you have on the other hand Electron, which is basically an execution process for the Node.js and the JavaScript side. Uh, and on the other hand, you have a UI, which is basically built by Webpack and also executed on the UI environment. So let's just jump to the terminal and make an initial installation process. Yeah. So let's just make our create React app here. So for that, I'm using this installation. I'm sure if you are already familiar with React, you have done this, but I'm just following the process right now. So you are going to install this on your environment globally or depending on your needs. Uh, and we actually going to make our desktop application using a TypeScript command. If you take a look here, I'm just using a TypeScript flag, which tells create React app that we are going to use a TypeScript as a main driver for our coding process. Okay, now when there was some time passed, obviously because there's a lot of npm packages that was good installed, we have our desktop application folder, which contains all necessary files for running only React application. So we don't have Electron right now here. So what we're going to do is actually install Electron inside this directory, but as a dev dependency. Uh, because first of all, Electron is actually a library for Node.js, and later on we are going to execute that with an Electron executable, not a Node executable. Uh, this is because Electron itself is bundled, packaged as a binary file for running on Mac, Windows, and Linux kind of operating systems. So we just dealing with the JavaScript. So we have to have that library to run. So after making these installations, let's just open VS Code. So this is pretty much a very simple React application. It's not, it doesn't have like any complicated stuff. It's just pretty much standard create React process, nothing else. And if I'll try right now here, let me just jump in the terminal. If I'll make just a starting process here with npm start, it will try to compile our React stuff, and we'll basically get a starting point for every create React application. So we have this here. So we are going right now to try this run inside an Electron application, the usual desktop application. So the steps to getting that, we actually have to make our folder structure a little bit differently. So what I'm usually doing is I'm making an Electron folder inside the root, just to separate UI and the Electron functionality, because obviously we will have some non-UI related functionality to connect with the Electron itself. We are making here index.ts, which should be the main entry point for the Electron. We are going to have preload ts. This file is, we're not going to use this file right now, but it is kind of, I'll say, the middleware between starting the actual web application and Node.js environment itself. And we are going to have another tsconf.json file, which is going to be our main TypeScript compiling type of stuff for our Electron application itself. So I have actually predefined settings. So let's just copy paste that. I'll just link a simple repository on the description just to get started with the TypeScript and the actual Electron itself. So what we have here is the our output build directory, which is the same as our create React app. It's the root build directory there. And we are going to include everything which is inside this Electron application. So nothing really special. And we are going to compile this TypeScript to CommonJS, which is, I'll say, compatible almost all versions with Node.js. And Electron is itself using a plain JavaScript to run the application. So on a main Electron file, this is where the actual, I'll say, process is happening. Okay, let's just rename this Electron. So this is the main file where the actual process is happening, which means that whenever you are running this desktop application, it grabs that, creates a window, which is basic browser window, but inside that desktop application, and it tries to load this preload.js, which is right now TypeScript, but after compiling that, it will be JS, and defines the base window width and height. You can make this dynamic if you want. There is modules for that. And the most important part here is that we are trying to load our main HTML file in order to get started with the UI from the pre-built create React app application index.html file. And later on, we have here development tools open. If you imagine this is like making an inspect element on Google Chrome. Right now, we don't need this, but on usual regular development, you have to keep this open because it just helps you to track your files if they're loaded or you have any JavaScript errors or not. It's pretty important to keep it open. And the rest is pretty standard. Let's just try to make our package.json to build this application. And then on the later videos, we'll try to make a specific API breakthrough and work around on that. Yeah, so we are going to open up our main package.json file, which right now contains all necessary libraries for building our React application and also Electron dev dependency here. But the actual build scripts right now here is only for building React application, not the Electron itself. So what we are going to do is just define or let's just separate the building processes for web and desktop because we have like them completely separate. So on the one hand, we have here a start web, which is starting a React application itself inside the browser without building an Electron application. This is useful when you have to build a UI before jumping to desktop, because it's sometimes harder to preload stuff in Electron dynamically, and on the development side you have to have like this hot reload build environment. And we are going to have also build a web script which builds a production version of our React. It uses like standard Webpack stuff as create React app, configure it. Nothing really special going on here. We haven't tweaked anything. It's just a plain create React app. The only difference is that we are telling create React app configuration that we are going to use our relative or the public URL path from the same directory as we are going to start our index.html file, which means that Electron actually going to preload all files, specifically static files, from the same directory as it is starting our Electron TypeScript or JavaScript file. So we are going to define this public URL in order to make static files to load for the Electron. Later, we are going to define right now the build process for the desktop. So we are using a TSC, which is TypeScript compiler, which builds based on our defined TypeScript configuration inside the Electron, which compiles to commonjs and saves that to our output directory defined here, which is same build directory for create React app. So we are going to keep that everything inside a build folder just to make easier to manage a single folder. Later on we are going to package that as a single application, so it makes more sense right now. And we are going to have another script which is basically a shortcut for two scripts. We are going to make start function start script for the desktop, which is actually builds a desktop using this script and then runs Electron application with already built Electron.js script. So which is the main entry point for our application. Then it is going to load index.html defined inside the Electron JavaScript file. Then it goes on to React. So as a plain browser-based application. So pretty much that's it. But if you noticed, we don't have actually TypeScript kind of I would say alerting or interpretation here, because our main project TypeScript definition does not include our Electron folder. So we have to do that in order to make our imports more expressive. We are going to make our Electron to be imported as well for our main TypeScript file. So that's pretty much it. Okay, we got an error. So this is pretty common in TypeScript definitions. It says that there is no export for this function, for this module, which is pretty obvious. So in order just to get rid of this error, we are going just to type expert and just a plain object. So it is not required right now. Later on, we are going to have some window hooks, which can help us to get some data from our Node.js APIs and hook that up to our HTML. Specifically, if we are going to work with the local computer files which are not accessible over UI, we can use a Node.js API inside this preload file because it's kind of middleware between running a UI and running a Node.js environment. So we can have this kind of definition. It sets an event when the document is actually loaded, and we can hook some kind of events here, data, or anything else that we want to access over JavaScript, or even like define global variables accessible in multiple pages for our Electron application. But right now we'll just keep this simple. We don't need right now. So this is probably it. We have done over our package setup. We made an Electron, and we haven't really touched the React application because it is just contains everything we need right now. It doesn't matter. React app is just a UI that renders, and starting an Electron application is more of a complicated before the UI, because UI parts are mostly the parts that you can also test on your browser. It's not required specific Electron configuration. So let's just try to run our desktop application. So first of all, we are going to build our React app just to get static files compiled for running our Electron application. So we are going to run yarn build web. This is probably the most easiest way to do because we have already like defined that. Later on we can just make a single script for that and for building, for starting, but right now let's just keep it simple here. And after making a build script for our web, we can start desktop, and boom, we got an error. Okay, so path doesn't exist. Let's try why. TS, okay. So this is kind of errors that happens a lot. So I wrote here tsconfig.json, and I actually have tsconf, which is not appropriate. So I'm going to rename that tsconfig.json. And let's try again. And it's building. It could take some time when you will have much larger application, but here we have already it started up. Let me bring here. Voila, this is our first React TypeScript and I forgot. So this is our first React, TypeScript, and Electron application. So this basic setup is the way how we are actually going to continue later on. So you can try to build this on your own. And if you have any questions, just ping me on the comments. I'll definitely reply you. and we'll try to fix a problem if you have anything, or just post that. If you want to get this as a code base, I can publish to this to GitHub, and I actually going to start a repository specifically for kind of snippets, just to make it way more easier to get started with this kind of application flow. So hopefully guys you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and yep,